Thank you, Acting Presiding Officer. I'd like to start by thanking the Chair for opening the debate and the clerking team for compiling such a comprehensive report. As you can see from the EU Settlement Scheme and Citizens' Rights After Brexit report, it is quite encouraging of the Welsh Government's actions in addressing the issues that have been raised, and that its recommendations are fair and realistic. And I'm delighted that the proactive measures taken by Welsh local authorities have been rightly recognised, with all 22 being graded as green. I also know that the Cabinet Secretary works very hard on these matters and is a passionate advocate, which comes over in many of the positive aspects of this report. That said, I'd like to pick up a few points which are more areas to think about rather than criticisms. I'm surprised that there's still so many late applications. I know, Cabinet Secretary, that these are mainly repeat applications and not new, and that there are concerns that these are increasingly complex. However, given the impact on people's lives, I believe that it would be very beneficial to understand the predominant reasons for refusal in the first instance. Obtaining that data would certainly help in the guidance that could be given and the steps that could be taken by the Welsh Government to support applicants. I note in the report that it is highlighted that almost 425,000 people had to wait for longer than 6 months, and almost 65,000 people had to wait for more than a year to get their status. And whilst I accept that an influx of applications is going to push up waiting times, I would argue that there might well have been issues in obtaining data from the country of origin and a greater need for enhanced scrutiny that would have substantially contributed to this, which is something I think we should try and find out. The IMA has previously expressed concerns over the accurate record-keeping, data capture and storage of applications, particularly for those cases related to children and care leavers, as we have heard, and that whilst this has started to improve, it nonetheless means there are lessons to be learnt as to why these new standards weren't enforced from the onset. Finally, Acting Presiding Officer, I'd like to highlight the issue of a lack of awareness and the fact that it is predicted that we may not know for maybe a generation who hasn't actually applied to the scheme yet. The UK officially left the EU over 4 years ago, and I find it very hard to believe that any EU citizen would not be aware of this and not have been aware that they needed to review their immigration status. But as the report highlights, we need to be asking what are the barriers, and even more troubling, are there people being forcibly stopped in making applications? Sadly, Acting Presiding Officer, human trafficking is a huge issue, and the more data that we can obtain will certainly help in identifying individuals who might be victims of this. It is mentioned that there are people who have been in the UK for some time and should have been granted settled status, but have been granted pre-settled status on the account that they have very little footprint to show that they have been here. I believe we need to continually ask why this is the case. Whilst it is shown that digital skills is one major barrier, we can nonetheless expect that as time goes on, this to become less of the case, and therefore we need to keep on top of and better understand the ever-changing new barriers that could arise. In a past life, when I was a local councillor, I held advice surgeries specifically to help EU citizens understand the process, and I've seen at first hand some of the difficulties and concerns that they had. There's always more that can be done, and we need to be ever vigilant. But at the moment, it looks like the Welsh Government is making good progress. Thank you.